This is a basic crochet hat made out of the camel stitch. This is also going to be a very in-depth project tutorial. Each row is going to get its own video, so you can go at your pace entirely. But what I like about this stitch is it looks like it's knitted. It's created in a spiral, it's very beginner friendly. All you need to know is how to make a half double crochet. So go ahead and head to the comments for the first row. This is how to crochet the camel stitch hat, row 1. To get started, we are going to chain 2, and then we're going to add 8 half double crochet into the first chain. If you're not sure on how to crochet the half double crochet, I have a playlist labeled Crochet 101, and you can check it out there. This hat is worked in a continuous round, so we're not going to slip stitch into the first stitch, and the first stitch from row 2 is going to be worked directly into the first stitch of row 1. Be sure to check out the comments for row 2, and if you like these kind of close-up stitch tutorials, be sure to like and follow. This is how to crochet the camel stitch hat, row 2. Now this is where we're looking for the third loop. So if you look past the front and back loop, there's a third loop for the half double crochet, and that's where we are going to be putting our stitches. That pushes the front and back loop forward and gives it that knitted appearance. Then we're going to add a stitch marker to the first stitch, add a second half double crochet into the same third loop, and then we're going to move on to the next stitch. Add 2 half double crochet into it, and we're going to add 2 half double crochet into every single stitch around until we get to that stitch marker, and that's going to mark the beginning of row 3. And that is going to be our first row of increases. We are going to keep increasing for every single row until our circle reaches the diameter for the size hat that we're looking for. But this is it for row 2. You can keep watching the rest of the row or round, however you want to call it, or you can go ahead and head to the comment section for row 3. If you like these close-up stitch tutorials, be sure to like and follow. I post them every single day on my page. And if you have any questions or would like to request something, just leave them in a comment on any of my videos. This is how to crochet the camel stitch hat, row 3. So first I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and then I'm going to add a half double crochet into the third loop of the first stitch, put my stitch marker back in, and then I'm going to add a second half double crochet into the same stitch. Then I'll put 1 half double crochet into the next stitch, and then 2 half double crochet into the one after that. So essentially I'm increasing or putting 2 stitches into every other stitch all the way around until I get to my stitch marker. Whenever you're increasing in a perfect circle, you want to increase every stitch for the first row of increases and then increase every other stitch for the second row of increases. But that's it for the verbal instructions for row 3. Row 4 is going to be in the comments. If you like these kind of close-up stitch tutorials, be sure to like and follow. I post them every single day. If you have any questions or would like to request a stitch, you can leave that in the comments of any of my videos. And if I can't answer it in words, I will respond to it with a video. If you asked a question and I liked it and you didn't get a response, it's because there's a video in the making. See you in row 4. This is how to crochet the camel stitch hat, row 4, plus the end of row 3. So what happened is I got confused because of my stitch marker and how it's placed. So what I'm going to do when I get to row 4 is I'm going to take out the stitch marker, add my first half double crochet, and then I'm going to put that stitch marker on the third loop instead of putting it onto the front and back loop, because for some reason that was confusing me, my stitch counts. Then I'm going to add a second half double crochet into the same stitch, and then 1 half double crochet into the next 2 stitches. So it's going to be 2 stitches into one into the next, 1 into the one after that. I have no idea why I'm going so fast in this. If you need me to slow it down to half time, I absolutely can, but the concept is still the same as from the other rows. We're just adding 1 more stitch in between our increases for every single row. I do have a correction for the foundation round. I said in the voiceover that I used 8, but I actually used 7. Now it doesn't really make a difference, and in an attempt to not overcomplicate it, The number of the foundation stitches in the round have no impact on the size of your circle or the size of your hat. The number in the foundation round determine how flat that top is going to be. So if you're looking for a pointed top, you want to use 6 or less. If you're looking for a flat top, you want to use 7 to 10. And if you're looking for like a waviness, then you can use 11 to 15. So for a bucket hat, you would use 10 to 12 foundation stitches. But for like a Santa hat with a point, you would use 6. But row 5 is in the comments. This is how to crochet the camel stitch, row 5. I'm going to take out my stitch marker, add my first half double crochet, and then I'm going to put my stitch marker back. And then I'm going to add a second half double crochet into that same stitch. And then I'm going to put a regular half double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. Now while you're watching the rest of the row, I just want to go over how a basic crochet circle works. So here we started with 7 foundation stitches. And in row 2, we added an increase stitch, meaning 2 stitches, into each of those 7 foundation stitches. Then in row 3, we still added an increase stitch for each of the 7 foundation stitches, but now we have 1 regular stitch in between each increase. Then in row 4, we still added an increase stitch for each of the 7 foundation stitches, plus 2 regular stitches in between each increase. Now in row 5, we added an increase stitch for every single foundation stitch, plus 3 regular stitches in between each increase. So we can logically assume that for row 6, we're going to add an increase stitch for each of the 7 foundation stitches, plus 4 regular stitches in between each increase. And then I think you can guess how row 7 is going to go, and row 8, and row 9, and row 10. And that is the gist of a basic crochet circle. I'm telling you this because my hat is only a preemie size hat. In order for you to make an adult size hat, you need to know how to keep increasing even after I stop. But we're not there just yet. I will go over how you know when to stop increasing, but I wanted you to understand it now before we move on to row 6, which is in the comments. This is how to crochet the camel stitch, row 6. I already took out my stitch marker. I'm just adding my first half double crochet, then I'm putting my stitch marker back, and then I'll add my second half double crochet into the same stitch, and then I'll add 1 regular half double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. And then I'm going to repeat that all the way until the end of this round. So in the last video, I talked about how to increase every single row and the basics of a crochet circle. Now we're going to talk about the difference the size of the circle makes when you're making a hat. I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, but this video isn't just about how to make a hat using the camel stitch. It is an instructional video lesson on how to make any hat, any basic hat in crochet. So step 1 is to make the circle. Now the circle is what determines the size your hat is going to be. Ergo, the smaller the circle, the smaller the hat, the bigger the circle, the bigger the hat. But how do you know when to stop increasing? So the legwork's already been done. You don't have to go around measuring heads to figure out the average size of a head or the diameter the circle needs in order to fit that average size of a head. You can find those tables on Google if you just Google hat sizes, or you can go to my website. It's linked in my bio, but I'll get more into that later. But that table is going to tell you the size as in centimeters or inches, whether it's adult, preemie, child, teenager, and so on and so forth, and then the recommended diameter of the circle plus the recommended length of the hat. Now, if you know who you're making your hat for, you can go ahead and measure their head right above the eyebrow all the way around and figure out whether or not you need to be on the bigger side or the smaller side in that table. Or if you're just making hats in general, you can use that table as general guidance on how to make your hats. But I'll go over that more in the next video. Row 7 is going to be tagged in the comments. This is how to crochet the camel stitch hat, row 7. I already took out my stitch marker, added my first half double crochet. Now I'm going to put my stitch marker back, add my second half double crochet into the same stitch, and then I'm going to put one regular half double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Then I'm going to repeat that all the way around. Now, while we're working on this row, I did want to talk about gauge. So one way to tell if a pattern is well written is to look at the gauge swatch. A designer that knows about gauge swatches, to me, is a good designer. Now, in some projects, it's less important, but if you're making a garment and you get a pattern for a sweater, a hat, gloves, a scarf, scarves are debatable too. But something that has to be worn and has to fit a certain size, a gauge swatch is very important because it helps you make sure that your project ends up being the size of the designer's project and therefore fits the person you're trying to make it for. Normally, a gauge swatch is given in the form of how many stitches and how many rows it took the designer to create a 4-inch square using a certain stitch. Now, since this hat is worked in the round, designers will often account for that by telling you how many rows it took them to get to a 4-inch circle. So if you got to the recommended number of rows and your circle ends up being larger than 4 inches, you would have to start over with a smaller hook to make your stitches smaller. If your circle ends up being smaller than 4 inches, you would have to start over with a larger hook to make your circle larger. Now for this hat in particular, we're going over the basics of how to make a hat. Therefore, the size of the hook, the size of the yarn, and the gauge doesn't matter. And that is because we are going to increase the circle regardless of how many rows we have, because we're looking to get to the recommended diameter for the size of hat that we're looking for. And that ties into my last video. Essentially, my goal is to show you how to make a hat using any hook, any yarn, any stitch really, so that you don't have to follow a specific pattern unless you like this specific design. But row 8 is going to be in the comments. This is how big my circle needs to be to make a preemie size hat. So here it says the hat crown has to be 3.75 inches, and that is the size of my circle. These templates are available for free on my website. The link is in my bio. And yes, I'm using this as an opportunity for a little bit of self-promo because I get paid if you just visit my website. You don't have to give me any money. But regardless, when I fold it in half and place it to the top of the template, it'll tell me how long the hat needs to be for the minimum length. If you want to make it slouchy, you can add rows after that. But if you just want it to, cover the ears, that's the minimum length. Now for hats of different sizes, you can either use the templates and keep increasing your circle until it reaches the size of that circle, or you can use a table. You can look it up on your phone, and then you just need measuring tape to tell you the diameter of the circle, and that is going to be equal to the recommended length of the crown. Then for the length of the hat, you still need to fold it in half. Place the one end of the measuring tape to the very top of the hat, and then the length is going to go from the top until the bottom of the hat, and that'll tell you how many rows you need to add in order to get to that length. I could probably add another lesson on how to use the measuring tape version. It's not my favorite, which is why I made the templates. I had a really hard time with the measuring tape because for some reason my hats just would not end up in the same size. I'm not entirely sure why, but the template just helped me. I really try not to sound like a salesperson, but I feel like this is an appropriate way to bring in my website and let you know that I have resources on there. I haven't been able to update it in a while. TikTok is really all I have time for right now outside of everything else, but there's some stuff on there. And like I said, you don't have to pay me anything. I get paid just from people visiting my website. I also don't get paid for the downloads. I came up with this one myself. There is someone that sells the physical product of those templates. She sent me a message a few months ago and asked if she could sell physical products. If you'd like me to add her info to my website, I meant to do it a while ago, but I can do that, and then you can purchase it and order it, and she'll send it to you. It'll be laminated and on a key ring and all that fanciness. But the next part is going to be tagged in the comments. This is how you can adjust your sizing for your camel stitch hat. In this case, I'm making a preemie size hat. The head averages at 10 to 15 inches in circumference, and the crown has to be 3.75 inches, that's the circle, and the final length has to be a minimum of 4.5 inches. If you don't want to use a template, you use measuring tape and place it on one end of the circle, and then measure it to the opposite side, and that should measure 3.75 inches. Now, in order to get the tube to form of the hat, we are going to stop increasing, and we are going to just place one regular half double crochet into every single stitch going around, and we're going to add however many rows we need to get to the 4.5 inch length for this preemie size hat. And you measure the length by folding the circle in half and placing your tape measure from the top of the hat to the bottom of the hat. To make different sizes, you would have to find the table with the recommended measurements for the crown and the length, and then match your circle to the crown, and then match your length to the recommended length. I really hope that narrowed it down a little bit. Let me know if you have any more questions.